Welcome to the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for being with us. On May 5th, Ohio primary election voters will choose the party candidates who will run in a number of races this November. One of those races is for Ohio governor, with Vivek Ramaswamy leading on the Republican side, Dr. Amy Acton running unopposed to be the Democratic candidate, and Don Kissick running on the Libertarian ticket. Other races include Ohio Attorney General and Secretary of State, as well as U.S. Senator for Ohio, to name a few. And voters in some areas will also decide school funding issues, among other things. The voter registration deadline is Monday, April 6th, with early voting opening up on April 7th. All of this means now is the time for voters to confirm their registration and make a plan for how they intend to vote. There's some confusion about how to go about doing that right now, though, with talk at the federal level about changing voter registration and voting ID rules, including adding a proof of citizenship requirement. One piece of legislation being discussed is called the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, or the SAVE Act. It's already passed in the U.S. House, it's been in the U.S. Senate, has a ways to go, and is now available as an expanded version called the Save America Act, which has also passed in the U.S. House and is now sitting in the U.S. Senate. Now, this proposal has brought up lots of questions. Just today, President Donald Trump signed an executive order which requires the Department of Homeland Security to compile a list of verified U.S. citizens in each state who are eligible to vote, and then would restrict the post office to only sending mail-in ballots to people on those lists. It's also almost certain to be challenged in court, and some states, like Massachusetts, are already pushing back on this order. Now, we have experts with us today to clear up what you need to know to vote in this election, and talk through any questions you may have about attempts to change access to voting. Joining us for the conversation by phone, we have Jen Miller. Jen is the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Ohio. Hi, Jen. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Also by phone, we have Aaron Ackerman. He's the Executive Director of the Ohio Association of Election Officials. Aaron, thanks for being with us today.
Good morning, Stephanie. Pleasure to be here.
If you have questions about voting or registering to vote, or questions or thoughts about the Save America Act or about voting access in general, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can message us on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Jen, let's start with the voter registration deadline for the primary. That's Monday. So what should people be doing now to prepare for that deadline?
Every person, even if they're a regular voter, should get online and check their registration to make sure it's up to date. You know, a lot of us move and forget to update our registration, but also people are removed from the rolls if they are infrequent voters, and now there's new citizenship checks, and there could be some error, and someone could be removed accidentally. So every person should get online at their Board of Elections or the Secretary of State site and check and make sure the registration is up to date by Monday. And if not, they can update it then.
Okay. And there are a lot of ways to vote in Ohio. So let's talk about them, different options you have for casting your ballot in Ohio right now, Jen.
Yeah, of course. So everyone should make a voting plan. Excuse me. And, you know, we have 3 ways to vote, and that's incredible because that means we have different options. But each of those options has different requirements and logistics. And so, first step is to decide, do you want to vote absentee where the ballot is mailed to you? Do you want to vote at the early voting center, or do you want to vote on election day? If you vote absentee, you just need the last 4 of your social and your signature to request that ballot, but you don't want to delay. You want to get that request in immediately, and then you would prove your identity again when you return the ballot. Voting early and on election day, you need to have one of our photo IDs. They need to be unexpired. And then there are some other logistics too. On election day, for example, your polling location could have changed. So you're always going to check that before you leave your house.
Okay. Now, Aaron, we're talking about a primary election that's coming up here in May in Ohio. That's different from a general election. In a primary election, voters choose their ballot. So tell us what it means to choose a party-affiliated ballot, how that works. Do you have to make that decision ahead of Election Day? When can you make that decision, and what does that mean?
That's a great question. That decision is made either when you request your ballot by mail, like Jen was talking about, or when you show up either at the early voting location or when you show up at your polling location. So you will be asked at that point which party you would like to pull a ballot for. And that's when you make that decision. Republican, Democrat. I believe we also have a Libertarian primary this year as well. So you'll have some different options. If you don't want to affiliate with a party, if you don't want to pull a party ballot, you do have the option of just pulling what we call an issues only ballot, and that allows you to vote on any issues that might appear: school levies, fire levies, township levies, things like that.
And we do see those things on primary election ballots, and we do know we'll see them in some places on primary election ballots this May in Ohio, correct?
That is correct. Although, as Jen said, it's always good to double check. I will admit I am guilty of showing up at my polling location because I was enthusiastic about voting in a primary and I wanted to pull an issues only ballot only to be told that there were no issues in my precinct. So I went home a little disappointed, but a little wiser as well. So make sure you do double check just to make sure you have issues in your precinct if you do want to do that.
Now, Aaron, can voters switch party ballots when voting in a primary? Is there any kind of issue there if, say, you pull a Democratic primary ballot this year, but in the past you've pulled a Republican primary ballot, for example?
Absolutely, you are able to switch parties from your previous years. So we basically you show up and you simply say, "I would like to pull a Republican ballot. I'd like to pull a Democratic ballot." There's no restrictions on that. We have a mostly, for the most part, an open primary system in that regard. It used to be, I always say that we did have a law in the books for many years that was there that basically said when you showed up and if you requested a ballot for a party that was different from when you had requested earlier, then you had to sign an oath. And the oath was more or less affirming that you believed in all the ideals and values and beliefs of that political party. And so that, I guess, was the party's way of just making sure that you were affirming that you supported them. We got rid of that a few years ago. You don't have to do that anymore. You literally just show up, request a ballot, it's handed to you, and you vote.
Okay, so it doesn't matter what your voter registration party identification status says when you check your voter registration. Basically, you can go up and then you ask for the ballot that which you would like to fill out, right?
That is correct. It does not matter what party you are currently affiliated with. You can always switch parties without any hassle.
Okay. Now, Jen, we talked about Ohio allowing for absentee ballots, mail-in ballots. In Ohio, the grace period that used to exist is now gone for getting your mail-in ballot in time for an election. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, this is a part of making a voting plan is that laws change. And so you want to make sure that your plan is up to date. Unfortunately, our grace period is now no longer available. So it used to be that if your ballot was postmarked in time, that you had some days after the election for it to arrive in the Board of Elections. Now, your absentee ballot needs to be at the Board of Elections for close of polls before the polls close on election day. So that means if you're going to put it in the mail, do not delay. But it would be better to get your absentee ballot to the county drop box or to the Board of Elections office.
Okay. For anyone just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about what you need to know in order to make sure your vote is counted in the upcoming Ohio primary election that's coming up on May 5th. The voter registration deadline is April 6th, so we're talking about what that means, what you need to do to ensure that your registration is valid, and what you need to do in order to make sure your vote is counted. If you want to be part of this conversation, the number to call in is 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org. We have a call now from Todd in Ward 1. Todd, welcome to The Sound of Ideas. Please go ahead.
Stephanie, Jen, and Aaron. Did I miss somebody? Okay. If I did miss somebody, my mistake.
You got it, Todd. That's everybody
Okay.
today.
Okay, so cool. So I have a question about this. Has there been any attempt to remove any question about somebody's party affiliation or non-affiliation at all from the voter process? When people vote, they're voting, myself included. I'm voting for somebody to do a taxpayer-funded public job, period. Or there's an issue that's a public issue, and I'm using this civic engagement to get that issue moved forward. are we overemphasizing and causing confusion by making party affiliation at all or non-affiliation at all a part of the process when somebody's exercising their individual right as a citizen?
Thank you for the question, Todd. I'll give both of our guests an opportunity to respond. Jen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree entirely that it would be far better if our party affiliation was private. This is something that lawmakers on both sides of the aisle seem to oppose. In general, there could be some that are stand with us, but the majority of lawmakers don't agree, and this would take a change in state policy. But I do agree with you that in Ohio, I think most of us are independent. We may decide to swing back and forth between Republican and Democrat, especially given our gerrymandered districts where the primary matters so much. But unfortunately, I can't, in the foreseeable future, I think we will continue to have that party affiliation be publicly available.
Aaron, do you have thoughts on this?
No, I think those are all legitimate questions. I would just point out, in case there's any confusion, the way you vote in a general election, for whom you vote, what parties you vote for in any particular contest, that's all private. No one will ever know who you voted for on a general election ballot. So while we can determine, the public can determine your party affiliation, there's certainly no ability for them to actually discover who you voted for.
Let's circle back now to changes related to deadlines for mail-in voting in Ohio. As Jen just described for us, you can no longer postmark your ballot on election day because it has to arrive at the Board of Elections by the close of polls on election day. And that just seems incredibly unlikely that it would be sent the same day and received that day. Jen, you mentioned dropping off a ballot at the Board of Elections is probably a better bet. So when it comes to dropping off a ballot, are you allowed to drop off a family member's ballot?
Yes. And so if you're going to use the Dropbox, which is 24/7, you really should only be using that to return your personal ballot. If you are bringing a family member's ballot, you need to go while the Board of Elections is open so that you can deliver that into the office.
All right. And Aaron, for early in-person voting, which starts next week, the day after the voter registration deadline starts on April 7th, are those days and times standardized across the state in terms of access to early in-person voting?
They are. There was a time when we first started doing this that they were not. And so your county Cuyahoga County might look very different than Lake County. In fact, they did. But no, the state legislature and the secretaries of state over the years have standardized those so that there are standard hours now. They are certainly available if you visit your Board of Elections website or if you go to the Secretary of State website, and we can certainly run through those for you as well and your listeners today if you're interested. But yeah, they are standardized around the state.
Okay, great. We have
Let's just jump in really quickly, though.
Please.
They are standardized, so every county has the same hours. But those hours change. The first few weeks, they're the same. But then those last, as we're getting closer to the election, those hours can change even daily. So part of making your voting plan is, if you're voting early, to make sure you have the correct hours and you are showing up when it's actually open.
And where's the best place to find those specific hours day by day, even though they are standardized across the state? Aaron, where should people go to find those hours on a daily basis?
Well, we always encourage you to use those trusted sources. The Secretary of State's website or your local county Board of Elections website will have those all prominently displayed for you.
We've got a call now from Mark in Stowe. Mark, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Please go ahead. Hi, Mark. Do we have you?
Yes. Hi. I'm a little nervous. I have a question. Okay.
Sure.
When people look up my name information on Google, one of the first things that pops up is I'm registered as a Democrat. The girl on the phone before answered my question about being able to change political party, but when I go to the primary, that means I can't ask for one or the other. I have to choose. There's other things on the ballots, levies and things, so I have to choose if I want to vote to be a Democrat or Republican, and I choose Democrat, then I'm stuck with that. And now they've turned over all the voting stuff to the federal government, and they're talking about being able to have the Federal Postal Service monitor who gets the absentee ballots. Wouldn't it be easy for them to go through and sort out the Democrats and give us a hard time voting? And also, the way it is now, I have my own small business, and I've actually had customers confront me on the fact that I'm registered as a Democrat. Thank you. I'll sit back and listen.
Thank you for sharing your concerns there, Mark. So, Aaron, I'll direct this question to you. Mark is talking about what is public in terms of your voter registration status. So, you can register as either a Democrat or Republican or something else when you register. So, talk to us, Aaron, about what's public and also what's public if you don't choose party affiliation and you just make a ballot designation choice when you go to vote in a primary.
Sure. Yeah. Mark asked several questions, I think, there. And so let's try to kind of sort through them. One, to clarify, in Ohio, you were not actually able to affiliate or register for a political party. The way we affiliate with a political party, as Mark indicated, is by requesting their ballot in a primary election. So when you register to vote, you don't say, I want to register as a Democrat or I want to register as a Republican or an independent or libertarian or anything like that. You do that physically by pulling a ballot in a primary for that political party. So I think that's a key point. As Jen mentioned earlier, once you do that, however, that is public. And certainly political parties, as Jen intimated, use that information to reach out to their voters and do mailings and phone calls and all kinds of other things. And yes, as Mark said, the public does have access to that information. However, another point of clarification, I think I made it just a little earlier, is you do not have to affiliate with a party to cast a primary ballot. If there is an issue that appears on your ballot, you have the ability to go in and say, I only want to vote on the issues that impact me. I do not want to affiliate with one of the political parties. And you do have that option. So certainly all good points that Mark made, certainly all things you want to be aware of, but I do want to clarify a couple of those points.
Okay, and just to clarify further, if you choose to vote in a primary election and you choose to do something other than pull an issues-only ballot, so say I go to the ballot and I want to vote in a primary election and I say I want a Republican ballot, so that will become public when my voter registration can be looked up that I pulled a Republican ballot for the primary election on May 5th in Ohio in 2026?
That is correct. Yeah, that becomes part of your voting record that is public.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Jen, remind us about provisional ballots, how those work, and under what circumstances someone might need to cast a provisional ballot.
I think the gentleman had another question that was important, so I
Sure.
just don't want us to lose that, which is that he's also worried about retaliation from the Trump administration if you have a party affiliation that's not Republican. Let's just be clear that elections are administered by community servants at the local level. Our boards of elections are run by equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats, and they want every eligible Ohioan to vote, just like all Ohioans. Ohioans want every eligible voter to be able to vote, and that together we decide our future. So while I understand that concern, I will say that I trust our state and local elections officials to administer and implement this election and every election with integrity. And I would also just mention that the Trump administration on many occasions has not won in court when it has tried to kind of overreach or expand power where it does not have it. The federal government does not have power over the local administration of elections. If there are bad behaviors, we should expect lawsuits, and the courts, including by Republican appointed judges, including Trump appointed judges, have shot down those attempts at overreach. So we should be confident in voting and especially thank our elections officials and poll workers. I'll jump now to provisional ballots. Provisional ballots are incredibly important. Provisional ballots are given to a voter when there is a question about eligibility. There are many different kinds of questions about eligibility. Perhaps you didn't bring the correct ID. You will vote provisionally, and then you have until 4 days after the election to show up at the Board of Elections with the correct unexpired ID. Perhaps you moved, and so you will get a provisional ballot there. Perhaps there's a question about your citizenship, the same thing. You will be given a provisional ballot, and you have 4 days after Election Day to show up and prove your citizenship. Another reason you could get a provisional ballot is, let's say you requested an absentee ballot, it did not come in the mail. You can go vote in person. You're going to get a provisional ballot, and then whichever ballot actually shows up will be the one that counts. What they want to make sure that doesn't happen is that an individual has two ballots count. The biggest tip on provisional ballots is if you get instructions, written instructions, when you are leaving the polling location, take those and follow those instructions, and that will make sure that your provisional ballot counts.
Thank you for that, Jen. We have a question in now from Peggy, and this is also related to party affiliation in primary election. So, Aaron, I'll direct this question to you. Peggy writes, does voting issues only at the primary election remove my party affiliation? And if not, how do I change my party affiliation to no affiliation?
Spectacular question. So after, I believe, 2 years or 4 years, your party affiliation basically leaves you. 2 or 4 years of not pulling a party ballot during a primary. So that eventually will drop off your voter record. And that is basically the only way that you can unaffiliate. We do not have a process in Ohio whereby you can go to the Board of Elections and say, you know what, because of X, Y, and Z, I don't want to be affiliated with that political party anymore. Please remove that from my voting record. There have been bills in the legislature to allow voters to do that, but they have not passed. So in essence, your listener is correct. The best way, the only way really, to remove a party affiliation is just to kind of continue to pull issues only ballots when you show up at the primary. And Jen, I don't know if you remember if it's 2 years or 4 years, but it is a set amount of time when you will no longer be affiliated with that party.
I'm not sure. I'm sorry.
Okay. We have an email now in from Cliff. Cliff asks, are juries still summoned via the database at the Board of Elections, or are they assembled via the database at the BMV? Aaron, can you answer that question?
We do use our voter registration list to pull jury duty. There again have been some proposals at the legislature to change that. I know, unfortunately, that does serve as a deterrent some people to register to vote because they don't want to get pulled for jury service. But yeah, that is the way we do it in Ohio.
Okay. We have a call now from Michelle in Cleveland. Michelle, please go ahead.
Hello?
Hi, Michelle. Welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Please go ahead.
Hi. I was wondering, is it okay if I transport people down to the Board of Elections to either drop off their ballots and or to go in and vote? And my church was thinking about using our church van to help people get down there. Is that still okay to do here in Ohio?
That's wonderful. I'm sorry. That is phenomenal. Yes, please do that. Transportation is such a challenge for so many individuals, low-income individuals, senior citizens, people with disabilities. And also given that the one early vote center and the one drop box per county means that public transit could be hard getting to vote early or to return your absentee ballot. So providing that transportation is phenomenal. Thank you for doing that.
We got an email in from Chris, and Chris is letting us know that the voter registration page on the Ohio Secretary of State website appears not to be working. It's showing a 404 error. So we just wanted to make that announcement to people. Our producer did check, and it does seem like there is a 404 error that's showing up on certain pages. But the site voterlookup.ohiosos.gov is currently working. That direct link is voterlookup.ohiosos.gov. So, Chris, thank you for the note. And again, if you're looking to get to a page that is working related to voter registration in Ohio right now, voterlookup.ohiosos.gov is working. We have a call now from Tim in Cincinnati. Tim, welcome to the show. Please go ahead.
Hi. I want to make several statements here. Number one, I think gerrymandering needs to be stopped. And number two, with all this confusion, and I'm thinking from everything that I see, I think that Trump is trying to totally disenfranchise married women by, requiring birth certificates, I guess a marriage license, and then your driver's license or whatever. Everything that he says about voting is a lie. Every single thing he says about it. He has no proof whatsoever on numbers, and all the numbers that I see are so small that it's just unbelievable. Why can't somebody just tell this guy, listen, our voting is not rigged?
Tim, thank you very much for calling into the show. And that brings up a great question. There's been a lot of conversation about making voting more safe. Aaron, I'll ask you, what does it look like in Ohio right now? What is the amount of voter fraud that we've seen in Ohio?
Voter fraud is infinitesimally small, as Jen alluded to earlier, and I think this is such an important point. In Ohio, we run elections in a 100% bipartisan way. So it starts at the top with the way we have chosen to structure our election administration system as being 100% bipartisan. That is a huge check and balance that I think should give the public a lot of confidence in the way we do things. We don't connect our voting machines to the internet. That is a state law. So you can't hack or rig elections via the internet. We test all of our voting machines publicly. We conduct all of our counting publicly. So when we do our official canvass, it is a public meeting of the Board of Elections that our voters can attend and watch and scrutinize. And then we audit every single election in the state of Ohio through a public process that, again, the public can attend and watch if they have questions or concerns. So from well before Election Day, through Election Day, post-Election Day, we are very, very diligent in making sure that our elections are safe. Our audits show that. We have well over a 99.9% accuracy rate year over year for our elections. That, again, is all something you can document and double check if you wanted to do the math. So we feel very good about the way we conduct elections here in the state of Ohio. We feel very good that they are both safe and accessible to our voters.
Now, if you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about the upcoming Ohio primary election. That will be on May 5th. The voter registration deadline for that is April 6th. That's next Monday, coming up very quickly. And then early voting starts the next day, April 7th. We have two experts with us who are letting us know what the state of affairs is in Ohio when it comes to what's required to register and what you need to do to vote, if you choose to do that on Election Day or early in person or by mail. If you have questions or comments, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Now, one of the things, Jen, that our previous caller brought up is married women and how voting might be impacted for married women. And he's referring to something that's called the SAVE Act and also the Save America Act. These are two different pieces of legislation that are related to what's required to prove citizenship in order to register to vote, and also what might be required to actually vote in person. So, Jen, can you explain the difference for us between the SAVE Act and the Save America Act, both of which are not law, but they are proposed and sitting in Congress?
I don't know that it matters too much what the differences are. They're very, very similar. I think what Ohio voters need to know is that number one, this is not law now, so don't panic. But number two, it is wholly unnecessary and very, very bad. The caller is correct that if we need to prove our citizenship when we register, that is going to disenfranchise wide swaths of American citizens. He's right that it will definitely impact women. Ohio has 3.5 million women who are married or have been married, and at least 75% of them changed their name. So that means they would have to go get additional documents to prove their citizenship. Similarly, rural Americans are twice as likely to lack access to their birth certificate or a passport. Older Ohioans, we have 2 million Ohioans at 65 years and older, they often do not have access to their documents. The same with people with disabilities, and of course, youth voters. And so, what everyone should do is call their senator and say no, the US senators, and say no to the Save America Act. Really, we should call it the Voter Elimination Act because it would remove the right to vote from so many Ohio citizens.
We have a call now from Steve in Cleveland. Steve, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Go ahead. Hi, Steve. Do we have you?
Oh, hi. Yeah.
Hi, welcome to the Sound of Ideas, Steve. Please share your thoughts.
Thank you. I was thinking that the SAVE Act should actually stand for Suppress All Voting Everywhere or Stop All Voting Everywhere. Except that it probably won't apply to everyone, just as President Trump commented about sexual abuse to the extent that if you're famous, they let you do anything. And recently, he himself voted by mail when he says it's a scam. And his excuse was, well, if you're president, you get to vote by mail.
Thank you for the comment, Steve. And as we continue this discussion about the SAVE Act and the Save America Act, which people have been using interchangeably, they are two different pieces of legislation, effectively the same result. Some more restrictions in the Save America Act. That most recently passed in the U.S. House in February and is now before the U.S. Senate, which Congress is on recess right now, so we know nothing will be happening with those things, at least in the immediate future. But Aaron, how closely are boards of elections watching the debate in the U.S. Senate over these pieces of legislation?
Well, we do have a primary election coming up, so I would say on the list of things that keeps us awake at night, it's not at the top, to be honest with you, because we are pretty heavily focused on making sure that our voters have a good experience here on May 5th. So that's our primary concern. Certainly, we keep our eyes on anything going on at the state or federal level that is going to impact elections, and we want to make sure we're abreast of those and aware of those. Because yeah, as we've said earlier, any change that comes from our legislature or Congress is going to have huge impacts for how we administer our elections, and that's going to trickle down to both our voters and our poll workers, and we certainly need to be aware of them. But honestly, Stephanie, we are pretty focused on the May 5th election and just getting through that.
Aaron, I know I specifically asked you about voter fraud in Ohio a moment ago. I want to ask more specifically about non-citizens voting in Ohio because proponents of this legislation center on proof of citizenship for registering and casting ballots. So, what are you hearing from election officials? Is non-citizen voting a problem in Ohio?
From our perspective, it is not a problem. I want to be fair and say that the folks that are pushing for more verification of citizenship status would tell you that if one non-citizen votes, then that's a huge problem. And certainly we do have instances of a couple individuals slipping through the cracks and non-citizens voting. But I think the number is, single digits of several million votes cast. So I will leave the severity of that problem, I guess, to your listeners and to their own determination. I don't think we view it as something that is easy to do or is happening widely. And I do feel like in Ohio, I think Jen mentioned this right from the bat, we do have some citizenship verification that's already built into our process. It's something that we are actively pursuing. So we feel good, once again, that we've anticipated these problems in Ohio and we've really kind of gotten ahead of the curve as far as trying to prevent it.
And Jen, this legislation, it's described as voter identification legislation, but proof of citizenship is a high hurdle. So what documents would be required if this legislation were to pass?
So again, and let's be clear that thank you for saying if this were to pass. It is our hope that it does not pass. But again, you would have to prove citizenship. The document would have to explicitly say that the holder is a citizen. So some people think real IDs would count, but it wouldn't, except in 5 states. Ohio's real IDs don't say whether someone is a citizen or not. And so our real ID would not count. Instead, if you needed to prove your citizenship, you're going to need a birth certificate. If you changed your name, you're going to need to show proof of why you changed that name, like a marriage license. You can use a passport. But a lot of these are hard to get. Like, imagine if you got married in a different state 60 years ago. Trying to get your marriage certificate could be very, very difficult.
If you are just joining us now, we are talking about voting in Ohio's upcoming primary election. We have two experts with us talking about what you need to know and also clearing up some confusion about things, given the light that there is a conversation at the federal level happening about changing voter registration and voter identification requirements. The number to call in if you have a comment or a question is 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org. We have a call now from Brandon in Youngstown. Brandon, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So just to be upfront, I am a libertarian and I am not a Trump supporter. My thing is, I think everybody's trying to I think both sides are trying to scare the other. I think it's a little ridiculous what each side's trying to do. I just requested my birth certificate. I got it in 10 days. And my wife had to do hers. Last time she had it, she was under a different name. And she just got hers in 10 days as well. So I think you're scaring people by saying that married women are going to have a harder time. I think it's a little ridiculous. I've known several people that actually we just had a couple that got married a couple months ago. She had to request birth certificate, and they had to do their marriage license. I mean, everything came back within a week or two.
Brandon, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us and also the experience of some other people in your lives. Now, Jen, can you talk about the people beyond married people who might be impacted by this and some of the issues that may come up in terms of getting some documentation that matches your current name in order to prove citizenship?
Sure. And just to remind everyone that the league is nonpartisan, that we don't endorse candidates or parties. And so we look at this strictly from the voter perspective. And while I think that I personally could get some of my documents fairly easily, what I recognize is that that is not true for a lot of individuals. So it's good to hear that it was a very efficient process for that individual. It's great. That is not the case for many individuals. So again, for example, rural Americans are twice as likely to not have access to their birth certificate or passport. Also remember that they have slower mail service. So if you live in many parts of the state of Ohio, your mail doesn't just leave the county, it leaves the state to be sorted and come back. Older Ohioans, a lot of older Ohioans who are in assisted living or no longer drive, they may not actually have access to these documents again, and they may not have a caregiver who is able to assist them in getting these documents. There is an expense to it. There's a timeline to it. The same with people with disabilities. African Americans, 2/3 of African Americans, for example, don't have a U.S. passport. So what we're talking about here is that we want every voter who is eligible to be able to participate. When we have rules that make some populations have to jump through more hoops than others, that is fundamentally unfair. The Save America Act is not truly an ID bill. If it were, things like Ohio's Real ID would count. The problem is that it is so prescriptive and it is not thinking about the experiences of diverse American citizens. And it's also having this one-size-fits-all law for elections that really are run at the local and state level, where those local and state officials know their voters and their voters' needs.
We've got a call now from Bobby in Willoughby. Bobby, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Please go ahead.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call. I did have to get an Ohio ID from my mother when she stopped driving, and it was a process. I had to go to make about 5. You have to have 5 forms of ID if you do not have a current driver's license. It's not easy. But I'm a poll worker, and I do want to say that in Ohio, we're very buttoned up here. It's very, it's run extremely well. And I don't understand what this is all about unless there are still states that just allow a utility bill. That's what I'm curious about. Is that the case? Are we one of those states that do have a better voting system? Because it is very secure here. You cannot vote if you are an immigrant. It states it right on your driver's license. So some veteran cards don't work either. So it has to be a valid Ohio ID. So I'm just curious about how other states function if they know. Thank you for taking my call.
Thanks for that, Bobby. Aaron, I'll ask you if you have any insight into that question. How does Ohio stack up in terms of what's required for voting registration to other states?
Well, number one, thank you, Bobby, for being a poll worker. We can't do it without you. We absolutely depend on good folks like yourself to come out and run our elections on election day. So thank you so much for doing that. You are absolutely making a difference for your state and your country and for your neighbors. And I do believe that the majority of states at this point do have some kind of identification requirement. I think the vast majority of states do. We just went to a strict photo ID requirement about 2 years ago. Prior to that, going back to right around 2004, 2005, we did implement an identification requirement. As Bobby indicated, it was a little looser back then. You could use utility bills, bank statements, things like that. That was tightened up significantly about 2 years ago. But yeah, I think that the majority of states do have some form of identification requirement. I don't know exactly how many require a strict photo ID, but certainly we do here in Ohio now.
Okay. We have several callers waiting to have an opportunity to be part of the conversation, so we're going to bring those in now. Iva in Garrettsville. Iva, welcome to the show. Please go ahead. Hi, Iva. Do we have you?
Yes.
Hi, welcome to the show. Please go ahead.
Well, I wanted to say that I'm a poll worker as well, and anyone who has the least concern about that sort of thing should volunteer to be one. There, at virtually every precinct or every county is having trouble finding enough people to work at the polls under the restrictions of having one Democrat, one Republican for every transaction there. There's just no excuse for complaining when you don't know what it's about.
Thank you for the comment there, Iva. And now we'll say hello to Julie in Columbus. Julie, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Please go ahead.
Hello?
Hi, Julie. Please go ahead.
Hi. My friend who is a poll worker has told me that for identification this year, you need to have the star on your driver's license. Is that true?
Thank you for the question, Julie. Aaron, are you able to answer that?
I don't believe you need a real ID to vote. I think any valid current Ohio driver's license will work. I don't think you have to have the supercharged ID in order to vote.
Okay.
Jen, is that your understanding as well?
Yeah. So there are several IDs that are acceptable. It does not have to be a real ID. You can have an unexpired driver's license or state ID. You can have a U.S. passport. You can have a military ID or a U.S. veterans ID. What no longer counts is a county veterans ID. But at this point, if you have a real ID, that's great. You can use that when you go vote, but it is not necessary.
We've got a question now from Tracy in Erie County. Tracy, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Please go ahead with your question.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. My name's Tracy. I don't know if you already talked about this or not. I missed the very beginning of the show. However, I wanted to state that 17-year-olds that will be 18 by the primary election are eligible to register to vote. They can vote for candidates only, not issues, but they can register and vote in the primary at 17. I also just wanted to state, like the previous caller did about being a poll worker, I'm also a poll worker, and it is the best way to learn the ins and outs of how our system works and to be able to spread actual valid information to others.
Thank you for that, Tracy. We appreciate it very much. Thanks for calling in to the Sound of Ideas. If you're just joining us here, we are talking about the upcoming Ohio primary election and what you need to know in order to register to vote and also participate in voting in that election. The voter registration deadline for this election is April 6th. That's next Monday. Early voting kicks off April 7th, and Election Day is May 5th. We have experts with us to talk about any questions or confusion that you may have or any thoughts or comments you might want to share. The number is 866-578-0903, and the email is soi@ideastream.org if you want to be a part of the conversation. Now let's hear from Max in Canal Fulton. Max, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Please go ahead. Hi, Max. Welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Please go ahead.
Hi there. I just wanted to speak to some of the difficulty in getting additional documentation if, for example, the Save America bill does pass. So I'm actually born. I live in Ohio, and I've lived in Ohio most of my life, but I'm born in the state of Washington. And being born in a different state, especially one that's so far away, makes it even more difficult than just trying to, pick up the phone and call Akron and trying to get your birth certificate. In addition to that, when my parents, back in the early 70s, this is crazy, but we actually worked for a tire company. My parents worked for a tire company, and my sister was born actually in Iran. And she doesn't live in the state of Ohio, but, for a lot of people that are born outside of the country, I don't know what kind of documentation they typically have, but I know that she's very nervous because she has, apparently a piece of paper, but, trying to go back and get original documentation from maybe a place that you were born sometimes just isn't possible, especially now in her case. So, those are some of the additional challenges that probably you can't solve in a week or two, or even with a couple dollars. So that's all I wanted to say. So
Thank you very much for calling in, Max. I appreciate it. Jen, let's talk about primary election voter turnout. It is notoriously low. Why is it important that people show up to vote in these elections?
Ooh, I love this question. Thank you so much for that. Primaries matter as much, if not more, than general elections, depending on what you care about. A lot of times we have local issues on the primary, and, you can think back to the Avon Lake school levies, right, that failed in 2023 and then failed in 2024, and then finally got passed in 2025 in the primary, but passed by 60 votes with a turnout of 34%. There are so many examples of issues literally passing or failing by a handful of votes in the primary because so few folks show up. In addition, keep in mind that people in government currently, elected officials currently, as well as those candidates, are paying attention to what voters want in the primary. They're paying attention to that voter sentiment. And one of the challenges with that is that because so few people show up for primaries, we often skew towards party extremes. And that kind of distorts what the candidates and sitting elected officials think matter to voters, because we're not hearing from the full populace every primary. And then finally, I would suggest, because gerrymandering is such a problem at the local, state, and federal level, so city council in Cleveland is gerrymandered, as is our state house and our U.S. congressional delegation. It's important to look at what party typically wins in your districts, and then consider polling that ballot during your primary, because who wins that primary is going to win that legislative seat.
Okay. We did get an email in from Susan in Willowick mentioning that Ohio has a similar bill. Susan says Ohio has a similar bill related to the Save America legislation snaking its way through the legislature, and it already passed in the Senate. So even if the federal bills don't pass, Ohio may be faced with the same situation as is described in the Save America legislation. Susan writes, the BMV already has a section on their driver's license application for registration if this passes. So I want to ask you about that, Jen. Is that on your radar at all? Ohio Senate Bill 153.
Yeah, of course. And we have been opposed to that. And fortunately, we are not seeing that move in the legislature. But I do encourage everyone to join the League of Women Voters because that's our job. Our job is to be the watchdog for Ohio voters and to show up in the State House. And we ask our members to participate in advocacy when those things are happening in real time. It is a very different piece of legislation, but you are correct that it would require citizenship verification when you register. And again, it's going to impact the same populations that we've been discussing previously. If you are, a married woman, someone who was born out of Ohio, an older person, a person with disability, you are less likely to have that proof of citizenship. It's going to be harder to register to vote. The other thing it does is it actually makes registration drives really, really hard, both this federal bill as well as the state bill. Because if you have to show that proof of citizenship when you register, you're not going to likely have that when you're at a festival or a farmer's market. And in addition, even if you did, the organizers aren't going to have photocopy machines. Voter registration drives are critical for making sure that as many people as possible are registered. So our volunteers, for example, go to senior facilities,
Thank you very much, Jen, for answering that
Thank
question.
you.
We appreciate it.
Sorry.
We are out of time for today, though, unfortunately. So I want to thank our guests, Jen Miller, Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Ohio. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And also Erin Ackerman, Executive Director of the Ohio Association of Elections Officials. We appreciate the time.
Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate it.
And that wraps up the show for today. We will not have a rebroadcast tonight at 9 because NPR and PBS will carry live coverage of President Donald Trump's address to the nation. You can find every episode of The Sound of Ideas wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. To get the last word on today's topics, you can email us at soi@ideastream.org. Yesterday, we talked with Iranian Americans living in Northeast Ohio about the ongoing war in the Middle East. David from Cleveland Heights writes in, I do wonder about the complex feelings of those who remember the horrors under the Shah Pahlavi regime, which was supported by the U.S. and then the revolution. Whether they have relatives or friends getting killed by either the current Iranian regime or the U.S. and Israel, it's got to be confusing. Thank you for your thoughts, David. Now, tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas, we're talking about women's hormonal imbalances and some of the commonly associated conditions like polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS, and endometriosis. We'll also bring you a new installment of The Menu because Friday is opening day for the Guardians at Progressive Field, so we'll bring you an inside look at the tastiest foods at Progressive.